And joining me now to break down Karol Nawrocki's meeting with Rutte and what we can expect as the clock counts down to August's inauguration is Aleks Szczerbiak, Professor of Politics at the University of Sussex. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So clearly Mr Nawrocki is trying to network ahead of that inauguration on August 6th. What does this sit down with Rutte? And we saw some pretty relaxed photos of the pair. What does that tell us about how he views this relationship with NATO and indeed Mr Rutte himself?
Well, the first thing it tells us is that Karol Nawrocki wants to be a very active president. I mean, it's a month before his inauguration, and he's already meeting with international leaders. He's already setting out an agenda, a policy agenda, both domestically and internationally. And I think one of the important areas where, although the president isn't involved in day-to-day foreign policy, one of the important areas where the Polish president can insert themselves into the debate is on security issues. They are the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The president often represents Poland at the NATO summit, as Andrzej Duda did last week. And so this is going to be one of those issues where he's going to try and really insert himself into the debate and to put pressure on the government.
And given that, I mean, we've spoken a number of times, both over the course of the campaign and since election night. Nawrocki's campaign was largely Eurosceptic. In many ways, it was Trumpian. Do you expect that to carry over into his term?
Well, he's certainly more sceptical about deeper European integration than the government, as is his party, Law and Justice. And one of the areas where he's particularly sceptical about deeper European integration is developing a European defence identity separately from the NATO alliance. He is in favour of European countries spending much more money on defence, coming up to the 5% that Poland currently spends, all in favour of that, but it has to be within the context of the transatlantic alliance, and because he argues, and Law and Justice argues, that the United States is Poland's only credible military security guarantor, and he would feel that there is actually a risk to the EU trying to develop a separate European defence identity, because this might actually encourage America and Mr. Trump to withdraw from Europe, to loosen the transatlantic alliance, which he argues would be an absolute disaster for Poland's military security.
Nawrocki says he will meet with both Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at some point pretty soon after he moves in to the presidential palace. For Nawrocki, who's so far been pretty cosy with Trump but hardened his tone on Ukraine on the election trail, is this a case of Washington ties are his priority, Ukraine is a necessity?
Certainly Washington ties are going to be his priority. He has a very good relationship with Mr. Trump, who met him at a critical point during the election campaign. Members of the Trump administration supported him during the campaign, and he's going to make sure that that relationship stays very close. And contrasting his close relationship with Mr. Trump and the American administration with the poor relationship that he argues the government has. In terms of Ukraine, well, Poland's position on Ukraine will be unchanged in the sense that Mr. Nawrocki fully supports NATO in its fight against Russia. He will continue to back giving full military, diplomatic, humanitarian aid. But he'll also have a much more transactional relationship, a much more instrumental relationship with Ukraine. And he'll be much more assertive when Poland's interests clash with those of Ukraine, as they do on things like historical issues or economic issues like Ukrainian farmers' access to the Polish agricultural market. Mr. Duda was prepared to give Ukraine pretty unconditional support. Mr. Nawrocki will be much more cautious about this. He's also expressed skepticism about Ukraine joining the EU and NATO, which again is a significant break with his predecessor. Although they're both from Law and Justice, they have a somewhat different approach to the Ukrainian issue.
Well, in fact, on the campaign trail, he effectively ruled out Ukraine's accession to NATO. As you mentioned, he's been cold on accession to the EU, particularly anytime soon. Does Kyiv have reason to be worried about Karol Nawrocki becoming president in August?
Well, I think that he's going to leverage the support that Poland has given to Ukraine, or encourage the government to leverage that support much, much more. So I think that whereas up until now, Poland seemed to be prepared to accept that because they have this overarching common interest in stopping Russian expansionism and in particular in Ukraine either winning the war or having a peace on very favourable terms, Poland would effectively give support to Ukraine without any kind of conditions. Having said that, I think it's completely wrong to understand Mr. Nawrocki as some kind of a Russophile or adopting the Putin narrative. Russia, let's not forget, actually has an arrest warrant out against Mr. Nawrocki. He is persona non grata in Moscow. There's no doubt that he's committed to the Ukrainian cause in terms of supporting them in the war. It's simply that he's going to try and leverage the support that Poland is giving to Ukraine to try and advance Polish interests as he sees it.
Given your expertise, I want to do a quick pulse check on the ruling coalition. So we know the fact that this paralysing cohabitation between the current president, Andrzej Duda, who you've mentioned, and Prime Minister Donald Tusk is set to continue when Nawrocki takes over. We know he can use the presidential veto power to continue turning away Donald Tusk's proposed reforms. Do you see a potential government collapse on the cards at this point, even after Donald Tusk has survived this self-imposed vote of confidence?
I don't see a government collapse as being on the cards imminently because it's in the interests of all the coalition partners to hold together. In particular, I mean, the glue that really holds political formations and governments together in Poland, I mean, let's be honest, it's access to state appointments and state patronage. And if the government was to fall apart, there would be an election. These parties would lose that election and they would lose that access to those state appointments, which is really important to them. So there's no imminent prospect, I think, of the government falling apart. The problem is more the government kind of rotting from within. Karol Nawrocki's victory has changed the political dynamic very radically in Poland, partly because it was pitched as a vote of no confidence in the government, and therefore his victory is seen as a huge vote of no confidence in the government, but also because it's really put them on the back foot and shown that they don't really have any kind of a plan B. There is not a clear plan, a clear vision, a clear strategy that the government has to, in response to the fact that it's going to have to work with a hostile president for the next 2.5 years. 2.5 years is a long time. It can still change things around, but unless it changes that political dynamic, unless it comes up with a plan to deal with a Nawrocki presidency, which it's not showing evidence of doing yet, it's going to be in trouble.
Briefly on these temporary border checks with Germany and Lithuania, Prime Minister Donald Tusk says the move is necessary to stem the uncontrolled flow of migrants. Figures show the numbers are actually much lower. Do you sense that this is a political response from the government, perhaps more so than a practical response?
Yes, I think it's absolutely a political response. I mean, one of the things we've seen with Donald Tusk is that he's absolutely determined to get out ahead on the issue of migration. He thinks that this is a potentially lethal one for his government and indeed for liberal centrist parties in Poland and across Europe. And his strategy has always been to not allow himself to be outflanked by Law and Justice and by the right on this issue. He really didn't want to introduce these border controls. He knows that it's going to cause inconvenience for Poles who have to cross the border a lot, for tourists, and it's also going to cause problematic relations with the German government. But the way that the issue has developed over the last few days has become extremely problematic for the government and has forced him to respond. And one thing he's made absolutely clear, that he does not want to be outflanked by Law and Justice on the issue of migration, and seems to be prepared to do pretty much anything to avoid that from happening.
Aleks Szczerbiak, Professor of Politics at the University of Sussex, thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.